I never imagined a single moment could flip my entire world upside down. But that was before the foreman called my name and told me to follow him. It was just another hot afternoon at the construction site near campus. I was tired, covered in dust, and counting down the hours until my shift ended. I didn't stand out. I wasn't strong like the other guys. I mostly kept my head down, did my work, and tried not to give anyone a reason to look twice at me. But he always looked. Mark Turner, the foreman everyone respected, tall, broad-shouldered, confident in a way that made you straighten your posture whenever he walked by. The guy whose voice could quiet the entire site, and whose rare smile made you feel like you'd won something. I didn't think he even knew my name. Until that day. He didn't yell. He didn't bark an order like he usually did. He just said quietly, "Come with me. Now." And when I followed him into the half-finished hallway, away from the noise and the workers and the safety of the crowd, I realized his eyes weren't angry. They were something else entirely. Something I wasn't ready for. Something that would start a chain of events I wasn't prepared to face. Something that would cost both of us more than we ever imagined. Before we dive into this story, one filled with tension, vulnerability, discovery, and a moment that went too far to take back, make sure you subscribe, because this is the kind of story that starts small and ends with a truth that neither of us could walk away from unchanged. I never told anyone what really happened that summer. People think they know. They think it was just another job, another paycheck, another stretch of heat and dust on a construction site outside Phoenix. They don't know the truth. They don't know that everything changed the moment he called my name while we were alone. Back then, I was 19, broke, and desperate to save money for college. I took whatever work I could get, and the construction site felt like the kind of place where you could disappear, blend into the noise of machinery, and pretend you didn't have feelings that made life harder. Most of the workers were older men, loud, tired, and so sunburned it looked like their skin belonged to another decade. I kept my head down, put in the hours, never complained. And then there was Cole Bennett, the foreman, 32, sharp jawline, 6 feet of suntan muscle, tattoos that curled around his arms like brushstrokes. The kind of man who walked through the site and made the entire place straighten up. Not because he yelled, but because he carried a quiet authority, like someone who lived twice as much as the rest of us. I kept my distance. Men like him didn't notice guys like me. At least, that's what I believed. The day everything shifted was a scorching Tuesday. The kind where the air shimmered above the asphalt and sweat covered your skin the moment you stepped outside. I was hauling buckets of gravel to the back of the site, trying not to pass out in the heat, when I heard it. "Mason!" My name, coming from his voice. I turned, startled. Cole was standing near the storage shed, hands on his hips, sunglasses pushed up onto his head. He looked serious, or maybe curious. I couldn't tell. "Yeah." I called out, wiping my forehead. "Come here a minute." My heart kicked up. Not fear. Something else. Something I didn't want to name. I walked over, trying not to look flustered. The shed was one of the only shaded spots on the entire lot, and when I stepped inside, the temperature dropped just enough to feel like relief. Cole followed, pulling the door halfway closed behind us to block the sun. His presence filled the small space instantly. "You doing all right out there?" he asked. "Yeah, just hot," I replied, voice a little shaky. He studied me for a second, really studied me, like he could see through everything I tried to hide. Then he reached into the cooler beside him, grabbed a cold water bottle, and handed it to me. "Hydrate," he said, his tone softer than usual. "You look like you're about to pass out." I laughed nervously. "Feels like it." His eyes narrowed, not in anger but concern. He stepped a little closer, the smell of sawdust and sun mixing with something warm in his scent. "You been pushing yourself too hard?" "I'm fine. I just want to do a good job." "You are," he said quietly. "Better than most guys twice your age." I didn't know what to say to that. Praise wasn't something I expected from him. I opened the water bottle just to have something to do with my hands. He leaned against the wall, folding his arms. His gaze didn't leave my face. "You're different, you know," he said. My pulse jumped. "Different how?" He hesitated. like he wasn't sure if he should say more. Then he exhaled, slow and heavy. "You pay attention," he said. "You listen. You work hard without attitude. That's rare around here." I stared at him, confused, suspicious, hopeful. "Is that good?" "It's good," he said, a slight smile touching the corner of his mouth. "Real good." The shed suddenly felt too small, the air too still. I took a sip of water just to break the tension, but it didn't help. Cole took a step closer, not enough to invade my space, but enough for me to feel him. "How old are you, Mason?" he asked. 19. He nodded. Young, but not a kid. Something in his voice changed on that last word. Low, rough, loaded with meaning. My skin tingled. I felt an electric pull. Something I knew I shouldn't feel. Something dangerous and intoxicating. He looked down for a moment, like he was debating something with himself. Then he said it. The thing that would start everything. "You know why I called you over here?" he asked. My voice barely came out. "Why?" Cole held my gaze, steady and unblinking. "Because I've noticed you," he said. "More than I should." My heart slammed against my ribs. He took another step, now close enough that I could see the flecks of gold in his eyes. "I don't usually cross lines with guys who work under me," he said. "But with you, I'm finding that rule harder to keep." I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. Everything inside me twisted between fear and want. "Cole," I whispered. He lifted his hand, slowly, gently, and brushed his thumb along my jawline, like he was testing whether I'd pull away. I didn't. He exhaled shakily. I knew it. The shed went silent, except for the sound of our breathing. He stood so close the world outside felt like it no longer existed. But before anything else could happen, a loud voice echoed across the site. "Cole, we need you out front." He froze. His hand dropped. His face hardened. Reality rushed back in. He stepped away, jaw tense. I shouldn't have done that. I swallowed hard. "Cole, we'll talk later," he said quickly. "Not here." He opened the shed door, letting the harsh sunlight spill in. He didn't look back as he walked away. But I stood there, heart racing, cheeks flushed, skin still tingling where he touched me, knowing one thing with absolute certainty. This wasn't over. Whatever had started between us, whatever he'd said, whatever he'd felt, it was only the beginning, and the consequences were coming. I didn't sleep much that night. Every time I closed my eyes, my mind replayed what happened at the construction site. The way Mark, the foreman, had looked at me. The way his voice changed when we ended up alone in that unfinished storage room. It wasn't what he said that haunted me. It was what he didn't say. The pauses. The hesitation. The way his breath caught like he was stopping himself from something he shouldn't want. I kept telling myself I imagined it. Guys like him. Older, confident, rugged, with callous hands and a voice rough from years of shouting over power tools. They didn't look twice at guys like me. Especially not that way. But the way his eyes lingered. That wasn't imagination. And I knew it. The next morning, I showed up early for work, hoping I'd be able to clear my head before the rest of the crew arrived. The site was quiet, wrapped in dawn light, the air still cool before the afternoon heat would turn everything into a furnace. I grabbed my gloves, adjusted my helmet, and tried to focus. But then I saw him. Mark stepped out of the trailer, coffee in hand, clipboard under his arm. His shirt was already dusty, like he'd been here long before sunrise. His hair was still wet from a shower, and that small detail, seeing a man as put together as him at such an early hour, did something strange to me. He saw me immediately. For a second, he just stood there like his brain stalled. Then he walked toward me with that steady, slow stride that always made him look like he was in control of everything. "Morning, kid," he said. I hated the way my stomach reacted to that voice. Morning. There was an awkward beat. He wasn't usually awkward. This was new. "You sleep okay?" he asked. A simple question. Too simple. Too soft. Not something a boss usually asks a worker. I pretended to adjust my toolkit. "Yeah, fine." He nodded, but he didn't believe me. "You sure? You seemed quiet yesterday." I let out a weak laugh. I'm always quiet. He didn't smile. He didn't look away. He was studying me again. Before I could say anything else, another worker arrived, shouting a greeting from across the site. Mark stepped back like he'd been caught too close. And just like that, the moment ended. By mid-morning, the site was loud. Saws buzzing, hammers echoing, music playing from someone's speaker. Mark barked instructions, lifted beams like they weighed nothing, and moved through the chaos with the confidence of someone who'd lived his whole life in steel and dust. But every time I looked up, he was already looking at me. Not openly, not long, but enough. At one point, while we were moving lumber, his hand brushed mine. It shouldn't have mattered, but my breath hitched, and he noticed. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah," I said too quickly. His eyes softened in a way I didn't know they could. "If something's bothering you, you can tell me." I swallowed hard. Nothing's bothering me. But that wasn't true. He was bothering me. Or maybe the truth was that he wasn't bothering me at all, that he was making me feel something I couldn't explain, something dangerous. At lunch, the guys sat on stacks of drywall, laughing and swapping stories that all sounded the same. I sat a little way from them, eating in the shade behind a pallet of bricks. I didn't expect anyone to come find me, but Mark did. He walked over slowly, almost reluctantly, like he wasn't sure he should be doing this. He stopped in front of me, hands in his pockets. "You're not eating with the others?" he asked. "I'm fine here." He nodded like he understood something deeper than I was saying. "Can I sit?" I hesitated, then nodded. He sat beside me, closer than he needed to, close enough that our arms brushed, close enough that I felt his warmth even though he wasn't touching me. For a moment, neither of us spoke, just the sound of workers laughing in the distance and the wind rattling loose plastic. Finally, he said quietly, "About yesterday." My heart dropped into my stomach. He looked down at the dirt between his boots. "I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable." "You didn't," I said too quickly, almost defensively. His eyes lifted. "No." I shook my head. "I just didn't know what you meant." He exhaled, slow, heavy, uncertain. I didn't know what I meant either. There it was, the truth neither of us had dared to say out loud. "But whatever you thought I was trying to say," he paused, looking away again. "Maybe you weren't wrong." My pulse jumped. "Mark." He rubbed the back of his neck, looking frustrated with himself. "This isn't something I should be talking about with you." "Why?" "Because I'm your boss. Because it's inappropriate. Because you're younger." Another pause. "Because I don't want to screw up your life." That last part hit harder than anything else. He stood abruptly, like staying there another second would break him. "Finish your lunch. We got drywall going up after the break." He walked away before I could say anything else. But the air he left behind was different. Charged, like something had shifted permanently between us. The rest of the day felt thick with tension, not angry tension, not uncomfortable tension, but the kind that makes every glance heavier, every touch more noticeable. As the sun started to set, painting the construction site in warm orange, the last of the workers packed up and drove off. I stayed late to finish stacking the remaining materials. When I looked up, I realized Mark was still here too. The site was silent now, just the two of us. Again, he walked toward me slowly, too slowly, like he didn't trust himself the closer he got. "You should head home," he said softly. "So should you." His jaw tensed. "Kid, don't make this harder." "I'm not trying to." He stepped closer, close enough that the air between us thinned. "You don't know what you're doing to me," he murmured. My breath caught. "What am I doing?" He shook his head, laughing once under his breath. "Exactly what you shouldn't." Then he looked at me, really looked, and something raw flickered in his eyes. "I can't stay here," he said quietly. "Not right now." And before I could ask why, before I could reach for him, before I could make sense of what that meant, he turned and walked away, leaving me alone in the dying light of construction site, wondering what line we had just crossed, and what would happen when neither of us could pretend anymore. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him again in that unfinished hallway, the dust floating in the air, the echo of his boots on the concrete, The way his voice dropped so low it felt like it brushed against my skin. And then the worst part, the way he looked at me, not like a boss, not like a stranger, like a man who had seen something he wasn't supposed to see, something inside me I'd tried hard to hide. I woke up before my alarm, threw on my clothes, and spent 10 full minutes convincing myself that I had imagined everything, that maybe his voice hadn't really changed. Maybe he wasn't standing as close as I remembered. Maybe I was reading into nothing. But when I arrived at the construction site, the way the guys acted told me I was wrong. They were different. Not openly, not obviously, but enough. A couple of them looked at me longer than usual. One raised an eyebrow, almost like he expected me to say something. Another smirked when I walked past, a quiet, mocking sound that felt like a warning more than anything. I kept my head down and went straight to loading materials into the service elevator. As I pushed the cart in, I heard footsteps behind me, heavy, familiar. "Morning," he said. My chest tightened. I slowly turned around. Miguel stood there with his hard hat tucked under his arm, the morning sun hitting his face in a way that made every feature sharper. The jawline, the tired eyes, the faint scruff he never bothered shaving completely. His presence was overwhelming, like it always was. But today, something was heavier. "Morning," I answered, trying to keep my voice steady. He stepped into the elevator with me, way too close for a place with this much space. The door slid shut, trapping us in a silence that crackled like electricity. "You didn't look at me when you came in," he said. The words hit harder than they should have. "I didn't think you wanted me to." He let out a quiet breath, not annoyed, not angry. Something else. "Why wouldn't I?" he asked softly. I didn't answer. I couldn't. And that silence was enough for him to take one step closer. "We need to talk," he said. My pulse jumped. "About what?" "About yesterday." My throat went dry. Nothing happened yesterday. That was the wrong thing to say. His eyes hardened, not with anger, but with frustration. "Something happened," he said. "You know it." "I know it." I felt the elevator slowing as we reached the 10th floor, but he pressed the emergency stop before the doors opened. The sudden halt made my breath catch. "Miguel, I don't like being lied to," he said. He wasn't raising his voice. He didn't need to. The low, firm tone shook me far more than yelling ever could. "I'm not lying." He stepped even closer, close enough that I could see the dust on his shirt, the small scar on his jaw, the way his chest rose and fell too quickly. "You avoided my eyes," he said. "You didn't even say good night when you left. And today you're acting like I'm toxic. I'm not. So look at me." His words were a command, not a request. And when I finally lifted my gaze, something in his expression shifted, something tense, almost painful. "There you are," he murmured. I swallowed hard. "Miguel, you're my supervisor. We can't." "Stop," he said quietly, cutting me off. "You think I don't know the rules? You think I don't wake up every day reminding myself of them?" He dragged a hand through his hair, frustrated. "But yesterday," his voice softened, dropped into something vulnerable. "You looked at me like you understood something I've been trying to bury for years." My entire body froze. He had felt it too. The small space between us filled with something dangerous. Something that shouldn't exist, but undeniably did. "I shouldn't have lingered," he said. "I shouldn't have stepped closer. I shouldn't have said what I said." I knew what was coming next. He was going to take it back. Undo it. Erase it. I braced for it. But I'm not going to pretend I didn't feel something. I exhaled shakily. "Miguel," he stepped even closer, close enough that my back met the cold metal wall of the elevator. "You think I don't see how you look at me?" he said softly. "You think I don't notice the way you listen, the way you freeze every time I get near?" My breath caught. "I don't." "Don't lie," he interrupted gently. "Not to me." Silence. He was too close, too honest, too aware. "I see you," he whispered. And those 3 words hit something deep, something raw inside me, something I tried to hide from him, from everyone, from myself. We stayed like that for a moment, breathing the same air, sharing a truth neither of us had planned for. Then the radio on his belt crackled loudly. "Boss, we need you on the roof. Now." The spell shattered. Miguel closed his eyes for a second, then stepped away. Slowly, like every inch hurt him. He pressed a button to restart the elevator. The lights flickered back on, the metal cage jerked upward, and the distance between us grew even though neither of us moved. When the doors opened, he stepped out first, but stopped in the doorway. Without turning around, he said, "This isn't over." My breath stilled. "Miguel!" He finally looked back at me, his eyes dark, conflicted, unbearably intense. "You can pretend yesterday was nothing," he said, "but you and I both know it wasn't." Then he was gone, walking toward the roof, leaving me alone in the elevator, breathless and shaking. And I realized something terrifying. Whatever this was, whatever we had just stepped into, it wasn't something either of us could stop anymore. It was already too late. I didn't sleep that night, not even a minute. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him, Aaron, the site supervisor, the man who could command an entire construction crew with one look, the man who somehow saw me when no one else did. His voice kept replaying in my head, the low intensity of it, the way he said my name like it carried weight. And the thing he told me when we were alone, I couldn't forget it. I couldn't unhear it. And I definitely couldn't pretend it didn't shake something awake inside me. By the time dawn crept through my window, my pulse still hadn't slowed. My stomach twisted with nerves, and something else I didn't want to name. I was terrified of seeing him again, terrified not to see him again. When I arrived at the site, the morning sun made the metal beams glow, men shouting directions, forklifts humming. It looked normal, too normal, as if the world didn't realize everything inside me had shifted. I scanned the area automatically, like my body was searching for him without my permission. Then I saw him, standing near the unfinished wall, clipboard in hand, barking instructions with calm authority. Even from a distance, he stood out. He always did, grounded, strong, focused. When he turned his head and spotted me, something flickered across his expression. He nodded for me to come over. My legs moved on their own. "Morning," he said, voice steady. "Morning. I managed. Try not to sound breathless." He studied me for a second. "Rough night?" I stiffened. "How do you? You look tired." He paused. "And different." I didn't know what to say, so I stayed silent. "Aaron," one of the workers called. "We need you over here." He raised a hand. "Give me 5. Then his eyes returned to me, sharp, unreadable. "Walk with me," he said quietly. We stepped away from the noise, toward the back of the building where the steel frames cast long shadows. Every footstep echoed with tension. Every second alone with him made my pulse spike. When we reached the corner, hidden partly from view, he stopped, leaned against a concrete beam, crossed his arms, looked directly at me. "You avoided me yesterday after what I said," he began. I swallowed. "I didn't avoid you." "You did." Not accusing, just stating fact. He took a step closer. "Not enough to touch. Enough to feel. I need to know if I cross a line," he said. My breath caught. "You didn't." "Then why did you run?" "I didn't." "You did," he repeated gently. His voice wasn't angry. It was careful, like he was afraid I'd break if he pushed too hard. He looked away for a moment, jaw tensing. "I shouldn't have said what I said. I know that. I shouldn't." "You scared me." I blurted out. He went still. I forced myself to continue. Not in a bad way. Just, I wasn't expecting any of it. Aaron's chest rose and fell slowly. And now, that impossible word. Now meant everything. Now meant facing the truth. Now meant admitting why I hadn't slept. "I still don't know what to do," I said quietly. He nodded once, like he understood more than I was actually saying. "I'm not asking you for anything. I'm not expecting anything from you. He let out a long breath. "I just needed you to know how I feel." My heart hammered. He stepped closer, slow, hesitant, deliberate. The space between us shrank until his shadow merged with mine. "Can I tell you something?" he asked. I nodded. His voice dropped. I haven't felt this in a long time. Not with anyone. My chest tightened painfully. And being near you, he exhaled. It messes with me. I closed my eyes for a second, overwhelmed. When I opened them, he was still there, solid, steady, waiting. Aaron, I whispered, why me? He laughed softly. Why not you? Then he shook his head. You're thoughtful. You see things other people miss. You're quiet, but not empty. You listen. You care. His eyes locked onto mine. And when you look at me, it doesn't feel like anyone else ever has. My breath caught again. But if this is too much, he said softly, tell me and I'll step back. I don't want to make your life harder. I didn't answer. Because I didn't know the answer. Because I didn't know what I was allowed to want. Because wanting him felt wrong, terrifying, perfect. Before either of us could speak again, a loud crash echoed from the main site, metal hitting concrete, men shouting. Aaron's head snapped toward the sound. Stay here. He jogged away, shouting orders, taking control of the chaos like he always did. I followed slowly, heart racing. A stack of metal beams had slipped off a forklift and slammed onto the ground. No one was hurt, but the tension rippled through the crew. Aaron handled it quickly, efficiently, but I saw it, the way his eyes kept flicking toward me, checking if I was still there, making sure I wasn't scared, making sure I didn't walk away again. When everything calmed, he walked back to me. You good? He asked. I nodded. He opened his mouth to say something, but a voice called his name sharply. Supervisor needs you in the office. Now. Aaron clenched his jaw. Give me a few minutes, he muttered, then turned to me. We'll talk later. Don't leave without saying something. Please. And then he walked away with long, decisive strides. I watched him disappear around the corner, my pulse still racing, my thoughts spinning. Later. We would talk later. But later, I would realize something. Some conversations don't happen in time. Some truths stay unspoken too long. Some connections break, not because they weren't real, but because life didn't wait for us. And his promise, we'll talk later, was the last promise he ever made me. The sun was setting when I walked back toward the construction site, the sky turning deep orange, the kind that makes everything feel heavier, final, irreversible. I wasn't sure why I came back. I told myself it was to return the work idea I borrowed. I told myself it was because I left my water bottle there. But deep down, I knew the truth. I came back because I wasn't ready for our story to end the way it did. The place was almost empty now, just a few workers finishing up before heading home. Dust floated in the air like faint smoke. My boots scraped against the concrete as I walked toward the only lit area. The small office at the back. That's where he was. Liam, the construction foreman. 32, rough around the edges. Hands that looked like they'd fought the world, and eyes that looked like the world had won. And somehow, for reasons I still couldn't explain, he was the only person who looked at me like I wasn't just another college kid desperate for work. He looked at me like I mattered, and that was the problem. He stood inside the office, leaning over his desk, filling out paperwork. His back was to me. His shoulders looked tense, like he expected trouble. When I knocked lightly on the doorframe, he didn't turn around right away. Then he spoke, voice low, tired, and somehow already hurting. You shouldn't be here. I stepped inside anyway. I know. He finally turned. His eyes locked onto mine, dark and unreadable. Why'd you come back? I swallowed. To talk. There's nothing left to say. He said it, but his voice wasn't steady. There is, I insisted. You walked away. You didn't let me finish. Because I shouldn't have said what I said, he snapped. I crossed a line I shouldn't have. I took a breath. Liam, you didn't do anything wrong. He laughed once, sharp, bitter. Kid, you don't get it. If anyone finds out, no one will. That's not the point. He moved past me, pacing like someone trapped inside a decision he didn't want to make. I'm the foreman. You're a student. You're 20. I'm older. People talk. People assume. He ran a hand over his face. I can't be responsible for ruining your life. I stepped closer. You're not ruining anything. He shook his head. You don't know what this town is like. What people here are like. You're from the college. You're safe there. But here, he looked at me, really looked. Here, a man like me doesn't get to make mistakes. Not like this. The silence between us grew heavier, pressing around us like walls. Finally, I said, Liam, that moment we had, it meant something. I know it did. His eyes softened just for a second before he shut it down. You felt something, he said quietly. I did, too. He paused, pained. But that doesn't mean it gets to be real. That hit harder than I expected. My chest tightened. Are you saying it didn't matter? I'm saying it can't matter. I shook my head. So you're scared. He looked away, jaw tight. I'm being smart. No, I said, you're being scared. That got his attention. He turned sharply, eyes flashing, not angry but wounded. You think I'm scared of feeling something? He asked. I'm scared of what comes after. Of what happens to men like me when people find out we're not who they think. He took a step toward me. Too close. Close enough to feel the heat coming off him. I've seen what happens, he said. I've lived it, and I won't pull you into that. What if I want to be pulled? I whispered. His breath caught. For a moment, neither of us moved. The air between us felt electric, dangerous, fragile. The kind of moment that could still rewrite everything if one of us just took a step forward. Instead, he whispered, Don't make this harder. I'm not trying to, I said. I'm just trying to be honest. Yeah, he said softly. But honesty doesn't fix reality. I exhaled shakily. So what now? He hesitated, then spoke slowly. Each word sounded like it hurt to say. Now you go back to school. You forget what happened here. You move on. You fall for someone who can actually give you something real. And what about you? I asked. He looked down. I'll be fine. But his voice cracked. He wouldn't be fine. And we both knew it. I stepped closer. Closer than before. Close enough for our arms to almost touch. Liam, I whispered, voice trembling. Just tell me the truth. For me. For us. Was any of it real? His jaw tightened. His eyes glistened, not with tears he would ever admit to, but with the weight of something he'd been holding back far too long. He didn't answer with words. He answered by closing the distance between us, resting his forehead against mine, his hand trembling at my jaw, the kind of touch that said everything he wouldn't say out loud. Then, after what felt like a lifetime, he murmured, You were the first good thing in a long time. My chest broke open. Then why push me away? He pulled back, eyes full of pain I'd never seen in another person. Because loving someone shouldn't destroy them. My voice cracked. It wouldn't destroy me. He shook his head. You're young. You still believe love can solve anything. A small, broken smile. I don't have that kind of faith anymore. I felt something inside me collapse. A quiet, painful collapse. Please don't end it like this, I whispered. I have to. Liam. He stepped back. I'm asking you to go, he said, voice barely holding together. Before I stop being strong enough to let you. The air shattered. I wanted to fight. I wanted to stay. I wanted to choose him. But he was choosing for both of us. I nodded slowly, tears burning my eyes. Goodbye, Liam. His voice trembled for the first time. Goodbye. I walked out of the office, out of the construction site, out of his life. I didn't look back, because I knew if I did, I wouldn't have the strength to leave. Behind me, I heard the office door close. Quiet, final, like the last line of the story that never got the ending it deserved. We loved each other in the wrong place, at the wrong time, in the wrong lives. And some stories break us not because they end, but because they were beautiful right before they did.